And I think, sometimes we're like, what happens if I write the song or I publish the book and nobody buys it, or it's not that good? But who did you become and what did you enjoy by doing it along the way? So
All right. Hello, and welcome back to You Need a Counselor podcast. My name is Dr. Julie Johnson. I'm the president and founder here at Heart and Solutions in Iowa.
And I'm Chrissa Hunt. I am Vice President at Heart and Solutions in charge of our BHIS department. So BHIS stands for Behavioral Health Intervention Services, and that is our program where we go in home and work with children ages 4 through 18 on different behavioral skills. And this is our podcast, You Need a Counselor. So we are designed for people curious about counseling, but have barriers keeping them from experiencing the benefits of counseling. Our mission is to share stories about counseling, good, bad, and indifferent, and spread the message that everyone can benefit from mental health and behavioral health counseling services.
So today we have a returning guest. We've got Suzanne Culberg here with us today. You guys remember talking about saying no without feeling like a bitch, saying no without feeling mean. And we talked a lot last time about people pleasing and why we do it and how to stop people pleasing and the ways that it hurts ourselves and the ways that it hurts the person that we want to be when we do those people-pleasing things. And also we talked about how it doesn't really help us get the desired outcome that we are trying to achieve by doing the people-pleasing. So welcome back, Suzanne. Thank you so much for coming back and being with us today.
thank you both for having me back.
So you have a program called Why Wait? And it's Y spelled out WHY and then W8. Why wait? And in this program, you help women set those boundaries for themselves and build those systems for themselves so that they can stop the overdoing, stop the overgiving and the overconsumption. Tell us more about this Why Wait program. What happens when somebody signs up for this?
So it's such a great question. And just first of all, with the name, it confuses people, the W and an 8. It's actually an infinity, but it's really hard to get that on a keyboard. Sideways infinity. And it's like so many of us are always waiting for something to make change. We will wait until certain event is over, Christmas, birthday, New Year, Valentine's Day, anniversary, etc. Or we'll wait until we've had kids or the kids are older or we've bought the house or, ad nauseum waiting. And so what the program is about is why wait? There's no time like right now. And when we wait for the right time to make change, when life is more settled or, like all the stuff we tell ourselves, when is life more settled? Then something happens like, COVID or somebody gets sick or you get an unexpected tax bill or I don't know, something happens. And then we kick ourselves and we're like, oh, I knew this wasn't the right time. I knew I should have waited. And it's like, it's my answer to shows or programs, things such as The Biggest Loser or the 12-week challenge or things where people put themselves into a space for a period of time, even like health retreats. I was just chatting to a lady the other night and she's like, I don't know whether to do your program or a health retreat. And I'm like, you do you, boo. I'm not a convince you type person. I think that's gross. However, the reason I don't advocate so much for those, I'm not saying don't do them, but from my own experience, I've been to a health retreat. You go, you've got no kids, no work, no responsibilities. You suddenly are doing yoga every morning and meditation and everything's zen, and you're like, I'm going to come home and my life's going to be totally different. Mm-hmm. And then you get home, and the second you walk in, husband and kids are like, hi! And you're not excited to see them. The house usually looks like a dumpster fire. So you're already behind. All that work, all those emails, and suddenly your yoga and your juices and your meditation are thrown out the window. And instead of seeing it for what it is, you blame yourself for like, I'm just not organized enough. Like, this is all my fault that I can't follow through on this. And it's like, no, you had an experience in a vacuum that you then tried to replicate in everyday life, and then you beat yourself up for it. So Why Wait is about, with everything happening externally, you can make lasting change if you break it down into the tiniest baby steps and have a supportive community who celebrates those, who you're probably too embarrassed to announce anywhere else because they're like, you're celebrating that? Seriously? Like, that's not that big of a deal. But it is, because it's the fact that you continue to do it. It's amazing online. If you go to a retreat and you celebrate some big thing, everyone's like, oh, you're so amazing. But if you celebrate some little thing, you just kind of get the nascent eye roll or the side eye, like, really? You're excited about that? Yes, we are in Why Wait, because this is how we have big things happen over time.
I love that. That's really cool about, I mean, that makes sense with the health retreat. Like, obviously, all their outside external people are not there, so that makes a difference. So what are some of the things that you have people who do Why Wait do? Like, what are those baby steps or things that you put in place for them in your program?
Oh, 100%. So basically, when we start the very first week, it's about orienting. So it's kind of like, okay, I always ask, what else do you have on besides Why Wait? And I love it because every round there's at least one person who's like, nothing. And I'm like, oh, okay, so like, do you work? Yes. Do you have kids? Yes. Or are you caring for somebody or whatever? And it's just getting people to open their eyes to what each of us, whether we're working or not, or what we already do and already have in our lives. Because so many of us, we dismiss that. And it's, you get to the end of the day and you're like, I've done nothing. And then, it takes a couple of, I'm sure you guys do it too. It's like, well, I paid the bills and I got the kids to school. And like, at the time of recording this here, I'm super excited. It's the first time my kids have been able to have an Easter parade because of COVID. So we're hot glue gunning and creating it. Like, that was this has been an event. So it wasn't like because it was funny. Part of me was like, can we just buy one pre-done? And my kids are like, no, this needs to be, so it turned into a whole family affair. All these things that people dismiss. So the first week is about getting clear on what actually is on your plate. How many of these things do you want to do? Like, don't get me wrong, I loved making an Easter hat. But there's other things that you might be doing that you don't necessarily want to do. So delegating, as in, having a discussion, age appropriate chores, because sometimes mum ends up doing everything. Why? Because we do it. And it's funny, my children are 7 and 9. They have chores and they have things. And the other night I said to them, I looked around and I'm like, if this isn't dealt with by tomorrow, there will be no pocket money, because if I don't do my work, I don't get paid. Like, there's no yelling, there was no whatever, and it's hurry and scurry while I went and watched a show. It's the best. So delegating and also ditching. If it's been on your to-do list for weeks, months, perhaps even years, is it really a priority? Chances are no. And how does it feel just to release that? So for the first week, we talk about, getting things off of your plate and the freedom, the feeling that brings. And then the next week we go straight to the jugular for resistance, because how many of us, we join the thing, this is going to be the thing, until it's not. Mm-hmm. So like, what are the common resistances that come up? Perfectionism. If I don't do it exactly right, I don't do it at all. Procrastination. I suddenly need to clean the lint filter on my dryer, or I have to respond to that email or whatever. The extremism, like all or nothing. I'm either doing the program exactly right or I'm not doing it at all. What else do we have? The judge. Like, you think this is going to be the thing, and then you get in there and you're like, this isn't that great. So you start tearing the program down, or you start judging yourself. Like, I knew I didn't have time for this. And we really get clear on how these are normal, how these are common, what are they actually protecting us from, and how to move through them. And then we also talk about how change is cyclical. Like, I think we've moved to a world that's very linear, before and after, and every quarter must improve on the last, in this non-stop growth. I remember hearing Simone Seol say once that non-stop growth is cancer. And I remember she just said it as an offhand comment. And I was like, oh my goodness, that is so true. In any other system, non-stop growth is cancer. Cancer is bad. Mm-hmm. So it's like, there are times where we have an initiation, a spring, I'm going to change together, and a summer of doing the work, and then an autumn or fall, depending on where you are in the world, a harvest, and then a winter as a rest, which is why the program runs as it does, because we have a rest between rounds. Some people come back, some people don't. It's totally up to them. And then we just talk through, different things like the currencies we have. We all recognize money as a currency. It's a number on a screen or paper in your wallet. We all recognize time. We're going to meet up to get on this call at this time, or it's going to take this amount of time. But what about the energy? like the spoons, the capacity, the like, can I actually be bothered doing this today? And how do we allocate our energy for things? Because we have planned energy spends, and then we have unplanned energy spends. I need an Easter hat. It's like, oh, okay. It didn't just magically turn up, but how do you allocate for things? So yeah, I could talk on and on about it, but sabotage as well, because how many of us self-sabotage? That's a whole module about, how we get in our own way. So there's 8 of these kind of content modules, and then we do coaching on, how people go implementing, because it's all good. Like, you could basically probably get most of Why Wait for free. Like, I talk about it in my own podcast. I talk about it on podcasts I do. Obviously it's more in depth, but it's not the IP. It's not like secret sauce that you get, because we all know what to do. We just don't do it, which is that's the part that you pay for, the accountability, the coaching, let's see what's really happening behind the scenes.
Yeah, absolutely. So much good information here. I love that analogy of the health retreat, because it's similar in the mental health field. It's similar to an inpatient treatment setting versus a behavioral health intervention setting, which is a BHIS setting. In the case of a child, you've got children who go to a residential setting or they go to an inpatient setting, and those behaviors change, and then they get discharged, but they get discharged and go right back home where there's siblings and dogs and parents and relationships and all different things happening at home. And whereas behavioral health intervention sounds very similar to what you're doing, which is, okay, we have to embrace the reality of our lives. And so, yes, anybody can lose weight if they're being fed meals all day long that are healthy meals. Anybody can do those things when the only thing on the agenda is go for a walk today. But when we embrace the reality of our lives, who is in our lives, what our responsibilities are, and we acknowledge that those are responsibilities that are on our plate. I loved your example of that feeling of, well, no, I've got a pretty clear plate, but then being able to go really into the weeds and go, okay, but who's doing the dishes in your house? Who is buying groceries in your house? Who's driving kids to soccer at your house? Those are all responsibilities, whether we work outside of the home or not. We all have things that we're responsible for doing. And sometimes those can get so minimized that it feels like, well, if I'm describing my responsibilities, no, I don't really have that much, because of this comparison cycle that we can get into with comparing our lives and our responsibilities with somebody else's. So I love what you're doing, which is just you're acknowledging and helping people to embrace the reality of their lives and to go, no, anything that isn't sitting and staring at the wall is something that you are doing, is a factor in your life and a responsibility in your life. So I just think that part is really, really cool. And really the analogy translates so well also into the mental health space when it comes to inpatient versus outpatient in-home types of services, which I'm always an advocate for, because when your counselor's in your house, hearing your older brother yell profanity at you, right? And seeing the space you have to do your homework in, right? And all of those things, we can really get into those real life solutions. So I
love that comparison to the mental health field, and also, seeing the space that you have to do your homework, seeing how your brother, the other thing that came to me as you were describing, another similarity, which I'd never, that's why I love doing podcasts. You guys give me so many good ideas. When my oldest was young, she just didn't sleep. There's some gene missing in my child, and even now she doesn't need a lot of sleep. It's amazing. It was interesting to see what age where this catches up with her. But anywho, we ended up going to sleep school. It's called the Tristilian here in Australia. Went to sleep school. She was amazing. I was like, oh my goodness, I felt like a new person because I'd gotten sleep too. I come home and I was like, we're fixed. First night, everything happened again. I was like, what? No. And then we had the nurse come into the house. And that was a whole different experience, because there is the pets, there's the neighbors that bicker over the fence, there's the whole situation. And discounting, I'm not meaning to put down centers or places that you go to or retreats or things like that. What I'm wanting to highlight to people is the pressure we put on ourselves to replicate that when we get home. I think that's where, because we give our power, from my opinion, to the center, the retreat, the place, going, this is the answer, and I'm the person who can't keep it together when I get home. And it's like, no. As soon as we walk in the door, as soon as, we sign up for something, we are inadvertently adding something to our plate. And I loved your example when you said, driving kids to soccer and stuff. Sometimes the people I work with, their kids do something every single day after school. Like there's soccer and piano and dance and cheer. And then like for my son, we have psychotherapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy. So we literally just had the parent teacher, and the teacher said, do you have anything you want to say? And I said, yeah, here's how I've adapted the homework and here's why. Like, it's like, this is a boundary parent coming in, because if he's getting all of this, in the past, I would have just like, sure, we'll just add this on top. And then that's all that we do. And I'm like, no, we don't need to do all of this, not in a snubbery way, but, these are the things that we're doing. And then she's like, oh, I wasn't made aware. And it was interesting thing was I'd contacted the school, assuming the school had passed it on. They hadn't. So once again, a lot of this stuff comes down to also communication, because when we assume, how the saying goes, but it's kind of like, not just I'm not valuing what you're doing and whatever. It's like, but this is the other things that we're doing, and having this multidisciplinary approach to whatever it is that we're doing, rather than when I'm with this person, I do this because this is what they say. Because that's the other thing too. I'm sure with you guys, you'd have things that you cover with your patients that they cover with other things, other health professionals. What I noticed with my son sometimes is he's like, well, when I see the OT, she tells me to hold the pencil like this. And when I see my teacher, I hold the pencil like this. And I'm like, no, we are not encouraging people pleasing here. But you need that. And that's the role of the mother, the father, the parent, the caretaker. That is a capacity spend. And the same too with my son talking about his emotions, having a speak to each of them so they're all on the same page, and giving them permission to communicate with each other, because here in Australia it's a form and all this, so that they are working together rather than giving different strategies, and then the person's getting even more confused and not getting the help that they need.
Mm-hmm. And I know you mentioned both your kids do see counselors as well. Do you try and implement, like you were talking about with the pencil too, like those not people-pleasing techniques with your younger kids too?
Yes. So, and also too, they see different counselors, but at the same practice, so that they can, I've given them permission to chat amongst themselves, or and then sometimes working to something as a family goal, but and then we're actually doing a session. We haven't done this yet before, where all four of them, with me, it's 5 technically, get together to have that thing where there's been some places, because it's kind of like he said, she said, which is there is in any circumstance. And I was normalizing that with my children. Like, if we go to the movies and we watch something, the movie is the same, but we're having a different experience. So we saw a kids movie recently. I fell asleep. Obviously that was my experience, and one of them loved it and one of them didn't like it. And I was like, so this happens in any time in life, even when we have a conversation where, like, it's happened before. I've been honest, like, you guys have said something, I've been preoccupied with what's for dinner or whatever, and I've been like, yeah, sure, because I haven't really listened. They've run off all happily. So it's kind of like, it's not, nobody is wrong. There isn't a villain necessarily in a lot of these things. It's just a different interpretation of the same event.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's such a great example of, being able to prioritize these skills in your children and in our children, because nobody's teaching this except for counselors and coaches like you. And so, as a child growing up, we're not necessarily going to have, we might have, we're likely to have gym class, right? So we'll learn how to kick a ball, and we're likely to have spelling lessons. So we'll learn how to spell things, but we're not likely, unless it's intentional, to have somebody model this kind of thing for us and show us how to do this, how to navigate with the world, how to see different perspectives, and then how to embrace our own perspective and communicate it to other people. And so I love your example of the pencil and holding the pencil different ways for different teachers. I think that is such a great example, because you described it as it's pulling energy from that child that child could be using for any number of creative other things or enjoyable things. So I love that. I also loved what you said about when we struggle with doing too much. And I think that, more than ever, children are doing so much now. And so parents are doing so much. And so adults are doing so much. And everybody's schedules are crammed full. And it's become like this, badge of honor to be busy because we're overdoing everything. And I loved what you said about deciding, okay, we're going to do something or we're not going to do something. And Chrissa and I follow David Allen's Getting Things Done. And he talks about our someday maybe list. So we have our project list, our active project list. We have our next actions that go with that project list. But we have our someday maybe list and we have our no list. And it's hard for me as a person who likes to get things done, who's like, I have these ideas that just come into my head and I go, we should do this. This would be great. And so for creative people, it's so hard to say no to possibilities, to things that we could be doing in any given moment. But the someday maybe list is so helpful to me because I can put that idea, that project on my someday maybe list to know that, okay, I'm not going to lose that idea because there's value in that idea. And so for so long, I would go full steam ahead and go into next actions on that idea, even though I didn't have the mental bandwidth to do it at the moment. I didn't have the schedule time to do it in the moment. I didn't have the financial resources to do it at the moment, but I'd go full throttle on it because I was afraid I would lose it. I was afraid I would lose that idea if I didn't keep the momentum going on it. And to say no to any idea just felt really, really terrible. And so that someday maybe list is so helpful to me because I can put things on it and I know I'm not going to lose it. But I also know that I am not going to have to pile these other things onto my already full schedule, energy budget, money budget. So I just love that that idea of like the not to do list. Marie Forleo says the not to do list and the someday maybe list as well, to be looking at those things and going, no, I'm going to do this thing and I'm going to do it well. I'm not going to do all these other things.
Yes, well, I was to say multitasking is just doing a lot of things not very well. Like, and I loved how you call it a someday maybe list. What I call that is the toy box. It's kind of like it entertains my mind. It makes me excited. I'll get to it eventually. But there's times where I've got to put the toys away because sometimes it can be a form of resistance because it's like I have the thing to sit down and do, but I'm not that excited about this in the moment. Like the actual drudgery of doing the thing, but coming up with ideas is entertaining and it's exciting. I don't actually have to follow through. So it's like, yes, all these things are allowed to come into my mind and I'll put them in the toy box. And some of them I might pick up and some of them I might just leave there. But it's funny, at the time that we're recording this morning, it's early for me and I start journaling early and I was going to do it after this call, but I actually woke up a bit early. And I sat down, opened up my journal, and I was like, I could just check my email. Like, what if they've changed the Zoom link? And I was like, oh, well, I could just, get the kids' lunch boxes out. And all these things. I literally wrote about this in my journal. It's like the things that I do to avoid doing the thing and part of it is, all the great ideas I have. Suddenly, this thing that I'm doing, this is terrible. This is never going to work. But that's amazing. So we all do that. And it's just identifying it and not making it wrong.
Yeah, I love that. The toy box idea. That's cool. So do you specifically work with women then for your coaching, or can men use coaching too? Women?
So Women for Why Wait, I do some one-on-one with men, and people have asked, and if I had enough interest, I'd totally run a version of it for men. It's just there's something different generally about the energy of, the masculine and the feminine. And it's a gross overgeneralization, and I think for a lot of my clients, and I've asked before, would you be comfortable? And they just feel more comfortable having it be a women only circle. But it's funny, I do have men who read my newsletters, and I threw myself a virtual birthday bash because I'm such an introvert, and I had some dudes turn up. It was so great because it was, you know, on Zoom and whatever. But yeah, no, for Why Wait, it's women only.
Cool. Well, I love the idea of the infinity symbol for the 8 of the Why Wait. When you were talking about it, it reminded me of Up, the movie Up, and that the beginning of Up, where he meets his wife as children and they have these grand plans for travel, and then you see them get older and you see them get older, and then I cry every single time because they had all of these plans and these things they were going to do, and they didn't, and because of the waiting, and it becomes that infinite waiting, and so I just think that is such a beautiful acknowledgement that we have no full control over what happens in our lives. Like we make plans because we feel like it helps us feel like we have that control. And even something like putting something off for a year, or putting something off for 5 years, or until the kids are out of the house, or putting something off until, you know, we're older, more financially stable. Putting those things off it relies on the idea that there is that future time, that we will have that available time. And I think what Why Wait kind of highlights with that infinity symbol is that we don't guarantee that we have that time. You know, that Amish saying where they don't say, I'll see you tomorrow. They say, I hope to see you tomorrow, because tomorrow is just not promised to any of us. But we live our lives as though it is sometimes. And that's where, you know, perfectionism comes in, or procrastination, or thinking, well, it's not the right time, or it's not a good time. And when the truth is, there just isn't ever a good time.
No, there's no right time. There's only the time that you make right. And I think for me, in the times the things seemed really hard were like the biggest gift. So in both of my pregnancies, like very early on, my husband was suddenly made redundant, and people laugh and they're like, oh, you get a redundancy, you get a big payout. And it's like, yeah, based on how many years you've been there, my children aren't quite 2 years apart. So in the second redundancy, we got nothing, and they've been there a full year. And suddenly I'm pregnant and the primary income earner. And I'm like, and then with my first pregnancy, I got actually really quite sick. So I had quit work, and then my husband had nothing. And it's like, well, you can't take it back now. Like, you're already pregnant. But in so many areas in life, we can take it back. We can drop the ball. We can be like, oh, I'll do this later, and we retreat. And I think sometimes some of these really hard things that I have navigated, you know, with my husband, we've navigated, have actually built that resiliency and that grit to be like, well, there's no going back now. We have to figure this out. But in many aspects of our lives, when it's a change that we are desiring, not something that has to happen, we put it to the back burner. And then we put all of our dreams onto our children. There's so much pressure there. Like, because, you know, we can live vicariously through them. Like, I didn't get to do this, so, you know, you're going to do this. And it's like that. It's never too late for us to do whatever. Like, there's maybe certain exceptions. You might not be able to become an Olympian, but then again, there is masters, and there is, you know, there's things that you can do. But sometimes we count ourselves out. We're like, oh, we're too old. But you look at some of the writers or artists or creatives, or, you know, people who have done things at later stages, you're never too old. And what are you doing it for? Is it for the achievement, for the external validation, or is it for how you feel? Like at the moment, I'm doing these things called the Conqueror Challenges. Basically, I got kind of unfit, I'll be honest, and I didn't really like the gym scene. Like, I used to like it, but it's just not my jam anymore. So it's these virtual challenges. I've got a couple of them here. You go for a walk. There's an app. Oh, now my camera's blurring. And at the end, they send you a medal. My camera's going to come back. I was going to say, I can show you guys for those who are on camera. And so, like, this is the medal. This is the Lord of the Rings one. And then it basically, like, literally opens up and has the ring inside. It's freaking incredible.
That's cool.
Like, the child in me loves this so much. But then, you know, like the earn, and I literally did a post about this yesterday. There's 233 kilometers to earn that medal. Like, I paid for it. So there's that. And that's the argument I had with my parents. I'm like, yes, I understand that I paid for it, but I still had to do the walking. But like, is it the last kilometer where I tick over and they're like, we're posting you the medal that counts. And that's a lot of us. It's like, it's only the achievement of the thing that counts. It's like, what about the other 232 that I walked to get there? And I think, sometimes we're like, what happens if I write the song or I publish the book and nobody buys it, or it's, it's not that good? But who did you become and what did you enjoy by doing it along the way? So, random side story. Do you guys have the show I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here? Or is it an Australian thing?
It must be Australian. Or I haven't seen it.
I've heard of it, but I've never seen it.
So basically, it's kind of a show for like D-grade celebrities. And they send them off to like the jungles of Africa or something and make them eat spiders. And it's, anyway, long story short, it's just started here. So last night, kids and I are out for a walk because we're on to our next medal now. So we're going to Rome. Because it can be virtual ones like Lord of the Rings, or there can be actual places. So like we did the pyramids of Giza. It links up with Google Maps. I didn't realize there were so many pyramids in Egypt. I thought there was just the big ones. So it's a learning experience for all as well. Anyway, walking along, and one of our neighbors has a massive TV and their curtains open. And I'm like, we shouldn't look in other people's windows. But anyway, that was a whole other part of the conversation. And Xanthi's like, what are they watching? And I'm like, oh, I'm a Celebrity. And Casimir's like, oh, well, you do have a podcast. I'm like, huh? And Xanthi's like, oh, and you've written a book. I'm like, oh. And Xanthi's like, and you got thousands of followers. And I'm like, and Casimir's like, so what's the show that they're watching? And I'm like, I'm a Celebrity. And like, we've established that. But it's just really, really funny. But it's kind of like, to me, it's like, I wouldn't have counted myself as a celebrity, but what is the thing that you hold for yourself, and what do other people view about that? It's like, you've done all these things, and it just made total sense to them. And I was like, the name of the show is I'm a Celebrity. Oh, okay. Oh, it was really funny.
Oh, that's cute. That's funny. Okay, so what are some of the people who come to your group, or join Why Wait? Like, what usually leads them to there? How does someone know that they would be a good fit for this group?
It's so many things. So there can be people who there's basically something they've wanted to do, and they may have tried many, many, many times, but they've never seen it through the finish line. So some people, it is a weight loss journey. I don't like that term. I'm allergic to weight loss. It's release. Anything you lose, you want to find again. So they've gotten stuck, or they haven't followed through on the habits. Sometimes it's people wanting to start a business. Like, I lovingly call them the wantrepreneurs. I was there for a number of years. Because the fear of being seen, or I'm not sure what to do, or the follow through, or the ideas that they don't put in the toy box or the someday list, and they're trying to do 50 things at once. It could be just feeling stuck or overwhelmed, or basically I think the underlying theme is not putting yourself first, not even putting yourself on the list. Like, it's so many people when I talk to them. Because there is an option, if people go to my website, scroll down the very bottom, and they're like not sure, they can book in for a chat with me to see if it's a fit. And I'm like, well, what are your goals? Total blank look. And it's so common, because at some point in our lives we put these things on the shelf, on the someday maybe list, or on the not ever list, and then we don't revisit them. And it's like this need of like, I want to come first, but I don't want to be selfish, or I don't want to be a bitch, or like, what if it doesn't work out? But like getting themselves back onto the list and setting those boundaries, to saying to your family, look, I love you and I matter, not, mum will do it, mum will fix it, or it'll get done. Like the classic example is, say, your partner says to you, let's invite some people over and have a barbecue, and like, oh man, the barbecue. And then it's like, yeah, so now I need to buy the salad, and I need to make sure everything's wiped down, and I need to do all this. And it's like setting their boundaries and having the discussion of what's involved, never to guilt or shame, but to kind of like, and also, do you even want this? Like, how to say no without feeling, like a bitch, or without feeling that, your worth is tied to what you do. So if you feel like you're at the receiving end of everybody, and it's like, actually, I feel like I just want to get away or escape, or if I just had more time. I think the gift of COVID for many of us was time was never the answer. We had lots of time at home. We weren't magically DIYing or tidying or decluttering. We were just, bypassing. So it's actually feeling the feelings, experiencing them, and going through a group of people who are also prioritizing their needs and going through the ups and downs of what that brings, because it's not necessarily Disney princess. Sometimes there's some hard discussions along the way.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And you had an excellent counseling experience personally. And can you tell us about that? I know you shared about your children's counseling experience. Tell us about your experience with counseling.
I have had many, actually. So I will preface this for any listeners in that I didn't grow up with a family that encouraged counseling in any way, shape, or form. And even it wasn't until recently that they found out my children were having counseling. And then later they had this conversation with me. It's like, if you're a good mother. And I was just like, excuse me, I've come a long way now. But in the past, that really would have shaken me. And it's like, it's because I'm a good mother that I know my children need a place that's safe, that's not me, that I'm not going to bring my things into what's happening, because we're all human. If someone's saying something, we have our own feelings. I want them to speak to somebody completely external. So it was funny that we're having this conversation. So when I was a teenager, my doctor referred me to a counselor, and they'd recommended it younger. And my parents being, oh no, we don't do that stuff. We don't talk to other people. We don't air our dirty laundry. So I moved out at 18, and he recommended this, and it was a big expense and stuff for a teenager, but he, strongly encouraged it. And I went, and we did all sorts of EMDR and different things that, I don't know the ins and outs of it now, but I found it really beneficial. And, to have that person where I didn't need to worry about what they're going to make it about them. Like, I think sometimes that with my family, the thing is like, you don't need to talk to someone else. I've got you, but they don't got me, because I need to worry about their response to what I'm going to say. Like, if I had feelings and it's about my mother, I don't necessarily want to talk to my mother about it. So to have that person who isn't going to make it mean anything about them, or then I don't need to manage their feelings as well as my own. And I think this is for a lot of people, like, we, as much as we try, we can't be impartial. If my kids are having feelings about me and I'm the person who has to navigate it all the time, it gets hard, because I will just be like, just be grateful, which is not helpful. Grateful is another thing I have a word allergy to. As soon as that word comes out, I'm like, this is my mum speaking. But, having that person who doesn't have an agenda, who isn't affected, who you can be that truly honest with. So I was a teenager, and anyway, my GP had recommended it. And we went to Tassie recently. This is where I'm from. And my daughter had a bite, and we had to go and see the doctor. And I saw the doctor from childhood, and I couldn't take her. And anyway, kind of very long story short, he said, can I call her as a follow-up? And I said, yeah, sure. Hadn't talked to me in 20 years. And he's like, it's so good to hear one of my patients, because he recommended me to the counselor, he's not the counsellor, who's doing well. So often people aren't doing well. And he's like, and I said, that point where you said you need to speak to someone outside of the family, and, how resistant I was to it for two reasons. That because my family had said, you don't need to do any laundry, and because of the cost, because, it was an investment. But I really think, that set me up on a different trajectory that I would have been on had I just kept shouldering it all myself.
Was it hard? I know you said your family was very anti-mental health. Did you kind of grow up with that same mindset then, or were you open to? Yeah.
I wasn't open to it at all. I was like, there's nothing wrong with me. Like, these things are hard, and it's okay. Hard things happen. And you just pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and, it's slow. It's so funny. We equated slowing down with like giving up. And it's like, no, there's so many things that we take on or that we do, because of conditioning, that either just don't need to be done, or that it's not that big of a deal to anyone else. But to ourselves, it's such a big deal.
That is, it's beautiful that you were able to overcome that generational stigma or generational thoughts about mental health. And now you're passing on this new perspective to your children, and you're normalizing this for your children. And by getting them in at this early age, to be able to say, this is something that I encourage. I encourage you to have emotions about, even about me as your mom. I encourage you to have feelings about that, because you are your own person. You are going to have emotions, and it's okay to have them, even if like I don't necessarily want to process them with you. It's a good thing that you have them, and it's a good thing that you do process them. And so I think that that is just really, really beautiful to be able to make that change first in yourself and in your way of seeing your world and seeing yourself, and then the way that you're passing that on to your children with that new perspective. I think is just so beautiful, not only to your children, but to the people in and the women in the Why Wait group. And it sounds like that group support is very helpful to the members of that group in a similar way to how, for you, a counselor, seeing a counselor, being able to have that place that was just for you, where it was only supportive, where you weren't being challenged on things you weren't ready to be challenged on. And then you were being challenged on things you were ready to be challenged on. And it sounds like the group really provides support in a similar way to each other by celebrating those victories with each other and challenging each other.
Yeah, 100%. And I think there's something for the space to do that, the community to do that, the realizing that you're not alone, and also choosing what you take where. So something I say to my people is like, choose your audience. So many of us, we put a lot of pressure on. It could be a parent, it could be a partner, to be our everything. And then we can get all dismissive of them. They don't love me. And it's like, my husband loves me fiercely. He has got no idea what it's like to be an entrepreneur, nor does he care. But it's not saying he doesn't care about me, but he's not the person I go to. Because sometimes if I do, he's like, well, why don't you just go back to your job? Like, which makes total sense to him. And then you can see how, you guys are nodding. You can see how these fights start. This person doesn't. And it's like, that he's not the person to go to for this. And I think sometimes people make things mean, oh, they don't love me, or I don't love them, or they need to be everything. And it's like, not everybody can be everything. There's some things that, I take to my mom or my sisters, and there's some things I take to my husband. And also when we don't have healthy and strong boundaries and we just kind of explode everything everywhere, that's a lot of pressure we're putting on someone else to hold space that they might not have the capacity or the ability or the skills to do. And I think, when you have these, relationships and start to build them and have the clear permission thing, like I have my own stuff. I don't think I'll put it on my group. Like that's for me to take to my own counselor, my own coach, my own support team. So it's not, messy. Because I think a lot of times in life, if we're having a struggle and we know that the other person has stuff, we just don't say anything. And it's like, struggle isn't a competition, but it's like knowing, and this is us discussing with people what we're available for them. So like my friends, not people I work with, my friends, this is a boundary that I have that some people think is too strong, but your boundaries are your decision. If they have something going on, like, first of all, I'm an introvert, never ring me unless it's an emergency, text first. That's, but are you able, do you have space for this today? Sometimes I don't. And when I say no, it's not that I don't love you fiercely or whatever. It's just that if I'm already up to here, like up to my eyeballs with my own stuff, and then you have something else going on, it's not in service for either of us for me to be like, vent away. And I think if we were more like that, but then it's on the other side of that, it's then having, how big of a deal is it? Because I remember there was one friend, she's like, do you have, capacity to say, I'm like, I'm out of spoons. Come back to me next week. When she did, she'd just broken up with her partner. I was like, honey, I would have made spoons for that. So it's kind of like, is it just my boss sent me an angry email or someone cut me off in traffic? Like if it's that kind of event, no. But if it's something big, so having a word or having something to say, like, actually, no, I really need you right now, I will clear my spoons for that. Mm-hmm. But it's having these discussions, because sometimes we just end up being on the receiving end of people's things, and it's just not the time or the place, or sometimes, it's funny, in my own family, I'd never say it, but sometimes my friends, I'm like, honey, you need a counselor. And it's not horrible. That's the name of your podcast. But it's not. And people in my family, that would be seen as an insult, or that'd be seen as you don't care. But in my friends, things I care so much that this is something that would be better served with a professional.
Mhm. Absolutely. Sometimes saying no is the kindest thing because we're not the person that's going to do that service the best to that person. So it reminds me of How I Met Your Mother, that show. There's a episode where the couple they have a new baby. And so they tell their friends, listen, if it's not an 8 or higher, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it unless it's an 8 or higher, right? And so then their friends, it shows their friends come to them and they go, oh, you need to, and they say 8 or higher. And they go, oh, no, it's not an 8 or higher. And then they come back, and they say one thing and they go, oh my gosh, that's a 10, and then they go join their friends and help them with whatever it is. But I love that example because it's something that they, as a couple, they were like, we're new parents. We have a new baby. We cannot take anything, or we cannot handle anything else unless it's an 8 or higher. And being able to have that boundary set, and then you watch their friends struggle with that boundary, but they do accept that boundary. And I think that, when people struggle with our boundaries, it doesn't mean that they're not going to accept our boundaries or that they're not going to respect our boundaries. I think it's that sometimes it's just that boundaries are difficult for people in general.
New.
Yes, absolutely. And, boundaries like the fact that I can't fly, that's a boundary. And I don't enjoy that fact, right? Like, I don't like that. And so it's hard for us as humans, I think, to identify where the boundary is. And when we see the boundary, to accept the boundary, because even if it's a boundary that's helpful to us, right? Like a fence that protects a child, there's still that resistance that I think is natural for that. And so when we're setting those boundaries, knowing that, okay, that resistance that the person has is not necessarily about me or my boundary. If they're having a hard time with it, it doesn't mean that I did something wrong or that I'm having a boundary that's too strict. It just means that boundaries are difficult for people to understand and to accept. And so sometimes just normalizing that too, which I think is so great about your group, because as we see other people set boundaries and we see other people's family members or friends reacting to those boundaries, it can really help normalize that. Like, okay, this person said it in a very appropriate way and is a great human and is a great friend and a great family member, and their family member still responded this way, right? So it can take that personalization out of it, which I think is such a great use of the group as well. So how can somebody sign up for Why Wait, for the group experience and the coaching experience?
Just one thing before I say that, I loved how you said the boundaries and the experience. Boundaries are a way to connect. You're setting them because you want that person in your life. I think sometimes we've had experiences of people making unrealistic hoops for us to leap through because they don't want to say, actually, I don't want to do this. But like a real healthy boundary, like imagine you saying you can't fly. So it's kind of like, well, I want to do something with Julie. She's not available to fly. So here's what she can do. Like that is a setting of, this is actually want to connect. So yeah, when you see it, it's like this person wants to continue to have me in their life. That's why they're setting a boundary, not ghosting or leaving it on red or whatever else it is. So if you're interested in more about Why Wait, if you go to my website, it's suzanneculberg.com. SuzanneCulberg. I'm sure you'll put it in the show notes. It's just this. It's a perler if you spell it. It has all the information about the program there. When the next dates are, how much it is, what's the as I say, the curriculum. I hate that word. What's covered? I have a word allergy to curriculum. Word allergies for anyone listening. Sometimes there's things that just gripe us, and we can do work. You could do therapy, you could do counseling, you could unpack it, or you could just change the word. So for me, weight loss, anything I try and lose, I want to find again subconsciously. So it's weight released, gratitude, appreciation. Curriculum, it's kind of like what's covered because I find a lot of pressure with that word. It's like, I need to get it exactly right. My perfectionist will come in. And then at the very bottom of the page, if you read through all that, you still have questions or you're not quite sure if it's for you, you can book a call. I'm more than happy to chat to you. I just ask that you have read the page first, because I don't believe in the sales thing. And this is going to save you because you don't need fixing and you're not broken. But, are you, have you taken the time to have a look and go, actually, this is the questions I have, because I've spent a lot of time creating that page. And also, is it best fit? Because it might not be. Like, I've had people who have been like, this isn't you. I think you'd be better served in a different form of container, because it's about you getting the result. I don't want to waste, your time or money or energy, or mine either, because it's like, if it's not a best fit, it's not good for anyone. But, having that discussion, and there's never any pressure or anything if you do decide, actually, no, it isn't for me. It's better to have that talk and know than to have it be just another thing that you've paid for that you don't do, because, we all know what that's like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So if you could give a suggestion to somebody on the fence about starting counseling or starting your group, what suggestion might you give them?
I can't remember what I said last time because I've been on your podcast before, but this I think is different. I would be looking at taking the money, because that's often the thing, or what anyone else will think, especially if you come from a family like mine, like, what are you doing? Take that off the table. Put yourself forward. Like, I loved how Julie used the Up example, like that movie, that montage. I'd never linked that before, but a whole life of one day maybe could have, the plans are getting dusty. Put yourself forward 5, 10, 20 years. What would be the result of taking that step, of having hired a counselor? Like, imagine being like me and speaking to your GP 20 years later and going, this was amazing, thank you so much. Rather than, because sometimes it's the immediacy. It's the immediacy of the cost, or the immediacy of how am I going to fit this amongst what I'm already doing. Your counselor, or, why wait first week, will be like, okay, this is where we're starting with. What's happening? What's on your plate? What needs to be, like, this is why you hire the person. You don't clean before you get a cleaner in your house. So many of us do. You come to us with the mess, and this is what we love to do. So it's like, you don't need to have all this stuff sorted before day one. Just the commitment and the willingness to show up and be messy and vulnerable and real, and trust that the person you have hired, that's what they're there for. And all the feelings that you have that, oh, I'm the only one, or everyone else is going to think, or whatever it is, everyone else in the table has that feeling as well. And it's a place to get real and vulnerable, not a place to put your shields up.
Yeah, wonderful. It is sometimes a barrier, that cost for coaching, for therapy, for counseling. That cost can be such a barrier. But earlier in the episode, you referred to that as an investment. And it truly is an investment of our time and our energy and our money, to go to counseling, go to coaching. And if we are able to find that right fit counselor, or that right fit coach, or that right fit group that supports us, we're going to get that money back. We're going to get that time back. We're going to get that energy back tenfold, if we put ourselves into it and we find the right fit match. So I love that you referred to it as an investment earlier, and I think that's so accurate. And so thank you so much for being here again. This was wonderful, as always. I always feel like we could talk for 5 hours. So we really, really like having you here.
Certainly. I'm Suzanne Culberg, and I need a counselor.
Awesome. Thank you. And if you're listening to this episode, send us a comment, or write a comment in the description or underneath about what were the messages about counseling or coaching or getting help when you were growing up as a child. What messages was your family sending to you about asking for help? So we'd love to hear the answers to our reflection question in the comments, or you can send us a text or an email. So Suzanne, thank you so much again for being here. This is wonderful. And we will look forward to Why Wait and getting your information out there to everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the You Need a Counselor podcast. We are so grateful that you are here. Now, we want to hear from you. Text us or give us a call at 515-650-3231. You can also find the You Need a Counselor podcast on Facebook and Instagram. If you've enjoyed today's show, please take a moment to like, review, and comment, as all of these things help others to find and benefit from this podcast as well. If you're in the state of Iowa and interested in mental health counseling or behavioral health intervention services, give us a call at 1-800-531-4236. And if you're a provider seeking play therapy CEUs, you can find us at patreon.com/YouNeedATraining. We'll see you for the next episode, Sunday at 5.